ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world. These are interesting, precarious, important times. And I am very humbled, ecstatic, happy to have one of, I think, the most important leaders in our country at all times, but especially right now, a man I've been honored to know. I've been privileged to watch his leadership grow and expand and evolve, and someone who just brings positivity and happiness and light to our country every single day. And I'm very happy that he'll be able to do that to this episode. The great and powerful Darren Walker joins us today on Independent Americans. Welcome, my friend.
Paul, it's great to be with you. And, it is you who bring light, and it is you who inspire me. And I'm honored to be on your program.
I think you're a true conscience for this country, Darren, and you're a true thought leader. And the work that you do, I think, is such a manifestation of your energy and your vision and the vision of so many other important leaders. And as I see, I wish we could do this in person, but obviously we can't. You have, I think, the coolest office I've ever been in. I mean, I've been in some cool offices. I've been in the Oval Office. And I think your office might be the coolest physical office I've ever been in because it's so deep with history and personal experiences and interesting things. Can you just share with people, where you are physically, what your office is all about, and how are you in this pandemic? We're all struggling with a lot right now, but how are you and the people close to you doing, Darren?
Well, thank you, Paul. You have been to the Ford Foundation's headquarters, my office there, which is really special. I'm actually at home, and I am in the library, which is why there are all these books behind me. And I feel really lucky to be at home and to work since last March 8th. I have been working from home. I live here on the East Side in New York. And I think I am doing, all things considered, very well. I mean, Paul, when you consider the state of our country, and particularly the state of many of our families who have suffered, the numbers of people, 500 plus thousand of our fellow citizens have died. And that means not only the 500,000 people we lost, but each one of them had a family. Each one of them was part of a community, worked somewhere, probably worshiped somewhere, had parents or children. And so our country in this moment is grieving. And so for me and you who are healthy, who are able to work remotely, we aren't worried that we're out of work or waiting for a government support to help us. We are blessed. And so our challenges in our personal lives, while they may be real to us and material, in the total scheme of things, when we think about our fellow citizens, we're blessed. And I feel that every day. And I feel that blessing because I was born in this country. I feel that blessing. And I feel that blessing because I get to every day do the work that we do at the Ford Foundation.
I mean, your life is a demonstration in leadership, in my view, Darren. And we talk a lot on the show about the Mr. Rogers line, look for the helpers. And I think you, maybe more than anybody I've had on this program, is a true helper. And even, in preparing for this conversation, I saw that you may not be at the headquarters now, but did I read correctly that the Ford Foundation headquarters is going to be a COVID vaccination site at some point, or may already be already?
It has been now for 3 weeks, and it will continue to be well into the summer. We offered the facility, and the city is using it. And I received so many messages from people who are in the building getting a vaccination. So we're a helper. But Paul, I think if most of us look back on our lives, we are helpers because we know that we wouldn't be where we are without those who helped us. And growing up poor in a small town in Texas, I was helped by so many people who put me on that mobility escalator, even though I was poor and Black and single mom and all of the data and the statistics that go with that. I had people helping me. I had good public schools. I had a great Head Start teacher. I had a counselor who said, don't settle for this school. You should go to the University of Texas in Austin. And I know there aren't very many African Americans who go there, but you should go there. And when I came to New York at my law firm, at the bank where I worked, the minister at the church where I worked later, each of them helped me. Each of them gave me counsel, wisdom, advice. And it's made it possible for me to, at least in a material sense, be deemed a success. And it's made it possible for me to live a life that a kid who started life in a charity hospital in rural Louisiana could never have probably imagined.
Darren, you talked about folks helping you kind of on an escalator. I feel like the Ford Foundation is like a skyscraper of escalators for people all across this country and all around the world. But you're also, an ambassador. And I feel like when I walked through the headquarters, when we could still do that, there was a really honest presentation of our country's history. Good, bad, ugly, the stuff we had to overcome. But there's also a real sense of in your office and in your home of your journey, your personal journey. You're a man of the arts and of passions and of interests. You've been all around the world. But I also saw before we started, you took a sip of something. So I asked this of all of our guests. Darren Walker, what is your drink of choice?
Well, I am literally today drinking some Diet Pepsi. And I need caffeine, and I need to get through the 9 Zoom calls and sessions that I have. But Paul, when you talk about our country's history, I want to just remind us of, yes, we show our history in this country, which is a history of noble, valiant aspirations that our founding fathers put in place. There has never been a constitution as powerful, as democratic as the United States Constitution. Even though it is flawed, there has never been, I don't believe, a system that has the potential to deliver justice, deliver opportunity, equality, like the system that we have in the United States. And it's why I cherish our system of government. It's why I believe that in spite of the flaws of our founders, they left us with the tools to fix the problems that they would not fix. Of course, Jefferson and Hamilton and all of the others, Madison, Washington, they all regretted, for example, slavery. They wrote that they knew that it could not sustain itself and America ever be fully the country it was meant to be. But they left the mechanism to fix that problem. And in successive generations in this country, we have committed ourselves to that. Now, that's not to say that we have never not had underneath the veneer of civility, racism, bias, prejudice. It has absolutely been a part of our narrative. But what I truly believe from my own journey in this country is that the goodness of the American people prevail. That most Americans don't wake up every day and say, I want to be a racist today. I want to be a sexist today. I want to exclude somebody today. That is not the way we have systems that are imbued with racism? Absolutely, we do. Our criminal justice system is but one example. But we are, as a people, we have the potential to do something truly extraordinary that's never been done in the history of this planet. A nation of immigrants, a nation of formerly enslaved people, a nation of indigenous people, all living together, governed by a system of democracy where each of them has a vote. And for me, that idea is a powerful idea that sustains me and gives me confidence that in spite of whatever challenge of the moment, and we have some right now in our country, I'm hopeful for America. And my belief in this country and its potential has never been stronger.
Mm. I think that belief, Darren, is contagious. That's part of why I'm so thankful to have you on the program now, when I think we're deep in, the hardest month of the winter. Folks are grinding it out. They're waiting for the vaccine. And I want to unpack, COVID, extremism, poverty, a couple of the things that you've been really prioritizing within your work. But I want to stay in that way back machine in Texas, or when you were growing up, and ask you, Darren Walker, when you were growing up, or when maybe later in life, whenever it was, what was your very first car?
Well, my first car was a very used 1972 Mercury Capri. And it was a car that my mother and I, together, putting our pennies together, were able to buy. It didn't last long because it was not a good car. Let's just say that. But it was my first car, so that is indeed the answer.
And what color was it, Darren?
It was avocado green.
Ooh,
a very 1970s color, don't you think?
That could be extraordinary or terrible. I don't know.
Well, you weren't born in 1972, so you wouldn't know.
Almost.
You wouldn't know.
I was born in 75, but it's also fun, to ask you, a car question. I know there's not a direct connection between the Ford Motor Company and Ford Foundation, but, asking you your very first car is a fascinating insight into you and your life trajectory. But I want to stay on Texas if I can for a minute, because it's obviously a focal point for the country, maybe for the world now. Can you break down what we should take away from what's happening in Texas right now? It feels like Texas is Katrina, and it feels like we continue to have these, for lack of a better framework, Katrina type moments. But now it also feels like the country moves past them more quickly than ever before. But, having grown up in Texas, but also having this global perspective and being able to influence so many of the factors that are unfolding there, what do you want folks to take away from what's happening in Texas right now?
Well, Texas has always seen itself as a separate part of America. In fact, Texas is the only state that was a nation first, was a nation before it became a state. And Texans have always been proudly independent. I think the challenge, as time has passed and we've come into the 21st century, is that we have in our country ideologies that have made it hard for us to find common ground, common solutions, and to see things through a sort of a gray dynamic, right? I mean, it's black or white.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that the way in which we think about our problems, we think about our politics, is oppositionally, and that you're either over here in the black space or you're in the white space, and that's not a racial dynamic. That's just an oppositional. And what actually happens is most problems get solved in the gray space.
Mm-hmm.
Most people's beliefs are in the gray space. Most people don't believe extremes of either black and white. Most people believe, and so in Texas, we have seen, in my view, an ideological framework when words like freedom and independence from the federal government, these ideas become sort of toxic notions, right? And I deeply regret that for Texas, because I don't think that that kind of ideology-based governance is going to serve the citizenry well in the long term. And I think we all suffer from that, left and right. So this is, we have intolerance on the right, we have intolerance on the left. So it's not as if I'm talking about, but I am saying though, that ideology, when someone says, well, we won't do something because the federal government will be involved. I understand when people want to not have additional layers of bureaucracy or oversight or monitoring or whatever. On the other hand, to some of us, when you say the federal government, it was the federal government that forced states to allow young kids like me to go to public schools. I would not have attended the University of Texas at Austin, but it were not for the federal government requiring the state to change to let smart young Black kids, just like they let smart young white kids go to Austin, Texas to go to college. So when these ideological sort of signatures have different meaning to different people.
There's a powerful insight into what you described there, Darren, that we've been exploring on this show when you said things get done in the gray space, right? And part of why we are exploring what it means to be independent on this show now in our next season is because so many people in this country are fed up with only two options politically, and with extremes that seem to be dominating our conversations and the lack of the ability to solve problems. And maybe Texas has become a case study on that. And I've been watching this unfold. And I feel like, Texas is too great of a state to have someone so small as Ted Cruz representing them. So my question is, would you ever run? You're the kind of person that could bring people together in Texas and beyond. You're such a success story and a powerful collaborator. You bring people together and solve things. You seem like exactly the kind of person that Texas needs right now to operate in the gray space. Would you ever consider it?
No, I'm not. I don't have the temperament to run for public office. I do believe, though, that there is no higher calling, no more valiant mission of honor, of valor than public service. I think, and I'm the old-fashioned Kennedy-esque view of service. And I worry, Paul, that we don't talk enough about service today. And obviously, as a military veteran, you understand service. But service has moved out of the mainstream lexicon particularly of elites. And in the past, that idea of service, whether you were a D or an R, whether you were a Kennedy or a Bush, service was at the center of your life and your life's work. And it worries me that I don't hear our most prominent, our most successful people talking about service as a part of their mission, their life's work.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I wonder, Darren, as we explore this topic, I would love to see you run for anything. As we,
You and my mother are the only two people I think who would vote for me,
I'm
Paul,
going
but
to
that's
I'm going to
okay.
challenge you on that. Like I've challenged a number of people on this program. You're exactly the kind of person that we need in public service because folks like you are so rare. And as we record this, friend of the show, my friend and someone I know, Wes Moore, has now publicly said he's considering, running for governor in Maryland. There are a lot of folks from philanthropy that have been solving problems and haven't really been making the jump from philanthropy or activism or advocacy into politics. In another world, AOC just raised $3 million for Texas. She could have been an executive director at a nonprofit, an Ashoka fellow, all the other things that you and I operate around. So I see this moment for philanthropy and philanthropic leaders that maybe will elevate some of these leaders and issue a call for them to serve. But can you break down on the macro? Ford Foundation, I don't know, over $10 billion, $14 billion. You guys are pumping out hundreds of millions of dollars. You're a thought leader. You're really viewed as an elite class for philanthropy. Has philanthropy ever in our lives faced this magnitude of compounded challenges at the same time? Can you frame it up with COVID, with the rise of extremism, with poverty, with inequality, with the Black lives, all of it hitting at the same time? And the need so great as things like a power outage hits an entire state. It seems like the hits just keep on coming. Has there ever been a moment that philanthropy has faced like we're facing now? And how do you expect philanthropy and how will you lead philanthropy in responding to it?
Well, I think philanthropy in this country is practiced quite broadly. It's not just the Fords and Rockefeller foundations. It's our churches, it's our synagogues, it's our mosques, it's our community centers, it's the Lions Club, it's the Elks Club, it's all of these groups. Those are centers of philanthropy. And we see a robust, I think, fundraising efforts, robust philanthropy going on at the community level, at the grassroots level. As far as organized philanthropy, the Fords and Gateses of the world, we have work to do. And it is true, we have two vectors that are challenges. One, externally, which is we have never faced the severity and acuteness of crises, as you just enumerated. And so the draw on the resources has never been greater. And so we've got to put money out the door to groups who are dealing with everything from increased food insecurity to arts organizations being closed down because people won't go to theaters and the artists have to get paid, to the challenge of COVID and the healthcare crisis. All of these issues, not to mention climate change, are demanding more of philanthropy. And then the second vector, internally, more is being, we are being challenged as a sector, right, of elite institutions sitting on aggregates of billions of dollars, and the public asking, what are you doing to help? What are you doing to make a difference? And so these two vectors are propelling and putting behind philanthropy pressures that we have never faced. And I think actually it's a good thing that these pressures are on us. And we have to be prepared to be accountable, to demonstrate our impact, to tell the stories. And it may not be that all the stories that we tell are stories that everyone wants to hear. I think people like hearing the stories of the Ford Foundation supporting the food pantries, supporting the vaccination centers and the direct human services. Others may not like the fact that groups we support are bringing lawsuits to ensure that the barriers to voting, when they're erected, that they're challenged in the courts, because we believe that every American should vote. And therefore, we support those organizations who are challenging states that put up barriers. And so there's a range of things that we are doing. And we, with our now $15 billion endowment, this year are giving away well over $1 billion that will address not only in the US, but internationally, a number of areas from our work in the arts and culture to our work around technology, the public interest, the future of work and workers, a very important piece for us, getting more civic engagement in this country, getting more Americans to engage in the public square, a very important work, mass incarceration, ending mass incarceration. These are all priorities for us.
Mm. Darren, you and the Ford Foundation have always been ahead of the curve. And you supported our work at IAVA. You supported so many other critical advocates. And I think that's an important differentiation that I saw and I see now, is that you're willing to support advocacy. Some foundations, some philanthropists won't. And we're at this time where, you could put out $1 billion into the country, but advocates can move government to the point where $100 billion is going to the VA in a new COVID relief package. So there's a scale that in this country only government can really reach, and the confluence of your leadership as kind of fuel injection and the advocates and the pressure and the crisis of the moment, maybe compounded with this sense from some of the elite that they've been kind of chilling while the rest of the country's been getting hammered. Nobody's had it easy, but comparatively, there's a lot of folks sitting on money, and this crisis may motivate them. So there's an opportunity for some moonshots here, right? So for once in a generation shots that we can take. We don't want to waste a crisis as an opportunity, but there's also this underlying threat to our democracy, to our civil union, to our now national security, that is extremism, white nationalism, the Proud Boys and others. You wrote a very powerful piece about that, and we've covered it at length on this show. I continue to see this as an American insurgency. As someone who fought an insurgency overseas, there are many parallels here. But can you frame up, in the context of all the other stuff, how you place that in the overall priorities of threats and challenges that we face as a country?
Well, I think there is no doubt that democracy is a threat to white supremacy. And what I mean by that is not the other way around. Actually, the more Americans who participate in our democratic processes and practices and institutions, the less likely it is that white supremacists, that white nationalists can prevail. Mm-hmm. I think the reason there is such resistance to having more Americans participate in our democracy is the sense that it will become more diverse. Mm. And some see that as a threat, when in fact I see that as the ultimate realization of the American experiment. And I think for me, I know that we have always had a strain of this kind of thinking. I'm reminded that when the constitutional conventions in the South after the Civil War were gathered, I mean, literally in Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, they said things at the convention: we are here to make white supremacy the law of our state. I mean, that's in the record. And so I'm not naive, this has been with us. But what has kept that at bay has been, I believe I always return to the goodness and the belief that this isn't America and this cannot prevail. And I know that for us at Ford, we believe in this country and its potential. I believe in this country and its potential. And we support those who believe, and we support advocacy for the reasons you say. We support advocacy so that we can have, not that the Ford Foundation can replace government, because we can't. No foundation, no philanthropy, even in the aggregate, can or should replace our government. But we can support those who are seeking to bring the voices of people who are often not included, like veterans, for example, who are often marginalized in policymaking, in the conversations about what and who gets prioritized. And so it's why we support efforts like IVA, because you are, on behalf of veterans, bringing forward perspectives and placing them front and center so that policymakers cannot look the other way. So that those who run the VA and the various apparatuses that control the lives of, in some ways, of veterans, that they are held to account to deliver. And we believe that they should be held to account to deliver. Because veterans have delivered for America. And so America should be held to account to deliver for veterans.
They have. And you know, we've explored it in the show, and I think the country is starting to unpack that there's, you know, they're a powerful community, but they're also, you know, ripe to be radicalized. You know, for you know, something like 1 in 5 of the attackers in the Capitol were prior service or had served in uniform. And I, you know, wrote a piece for CNN with Amy about the need for us to clean up our own house and to recognize that we were warned about this. Many of us have warned about this. When I went in to the Army in 1998 and up until a year ago, you could fly a Confederate flag in the barracks. That was allowed. So there are, you know, systemic challenges that need to be addressed immediately to overcome the institutionalized racism that exists in the military and allow some of this to thrive. But on the ground, you know, whether it's you guys helping people get the COVID vaccine or us trying to change hearts and minds, we've got to, you know, reach these folks that feel disconnected from society, and they're not just veterans. There's so many folks that,
and not treat them and not otherize them, which is the way veterans often feel. Right. And again, when we get back to the idea of service and the most noble and highest calling, I believe the real challenge is that veterans are often talked about as vulnerable populations. I find this term very patronizing. Veterans are often targeted populations. They are targeted by predatory lenders. They are targeted by private educational institutions that know they can make money off of veterans because the government will pay. They are targeted by white supremacists and nationalists who know that they have vulnerabilities around race and around their own status in society, and whether or not they are appreciated, whether or not they're being left behind, whether or not they and their kids will have opportunity in America. And so, you know, I think we need to recognize how that targeting happens and what we need to do to intervene to support the anti-targeting work, right? So no private predatory lenders. You can't profit off of veterans. And so let's put in place the policies that ensure that veterans don't end up with a disproportionate amount of college debt because you can rip them off because, you know, the government will ultimately pay for it when they default. Their credit is bad and they're in bankruptcy.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, you've got it. And I think they are one of many powerful populations in this country. And, you know, Trump saw it early. Trump saw the political power, the social power, the communications power of communities like veterans. And he talked to them early. He talked to them specifically. He talked to them often. And now we've got to counter that message. But there's also, whether they're veterans, whether they're white, black, you know, all across this country, Darren, there are a lot of folks that are frustrated and are
Absolutely.
angry. You deal with some of the hardest, thorniest issues that this country faces, and you're human. You have emotion. So Darren Walker, what makes you angry?
Well, let me start by saying, Paul, the people you described, for the most part, have a reason to be angry.
Mm.
So let me be really clear.
Yeah.
Their anger is not misplaced. They aren't bad people because they are angry, because they see economic mobility slipping away. They see jobs disappearing. They see the kind of union wage and benefits for the jobs they might have gotten when they return home to get a job in the private sector. Those jobs are gone, and they are rightfully angry.
Mm.
What makes me angry is seeing how they are exploited by the very elites who are benefiting from the problem we've diagnosed. And so what makes me angry is when I hear a working class veteran who is barely making ends meet argue that we don't need whatever the government policy may be, because if we do that, it's going to kill jobs, or it means that somebody's going to get something and I'm not going to get, you know, a Black person's going to get something and I'm not going to get something, right? When you hear them mouthing these things that they have been told through a mechanism of disinformation, that's what makes me angry, because you see how people are exploited. And we know how con artists exploit people, whether you are at the highest office in the land or you're on the street doing these 3-card Monte card tricks on tourists in Manhattan. I mean, you see they are able to exploit the weaknesses of an individual. They know their pinpoints. They know how to get to them with a message, with some words that pull them in and make them want to say, okay, I'll do that. And I think we have seen that these last few years. And so I get angry because I think it is such an injustice when you see what's happening. And some of it, I saw this, Paul, you know, growing up in Louisiana and Texas, I saw that. I saw the way elite whites pitted working class and poor whites against Blacks. And we saw that in the civil rights, because the messages was that integration was gonna, I mean, you know, the elites would put their kids in private schools and create another whole, but working class white, I mean, so it was the people who were closest economically who were going to be the most harmed. And that was the message from elite whites.
Right.
And the same thing around economic interest. There was I don't know if you have heard about Heather McGhee's new book. Heather McGhee is an activist who ran an organization, Demos, which you may know, but she has done a book where she interviews workers. And she interviewed workers at a plant in the South that was considering unionizing. And the number of white workers who said they weren't going to unionize because the unions were going to benefit the Black workers. And that they saw this idea of unionizing through a racial lens, not through a lens of solidarity,
right,
of people with a collective interest, right? We're all frontline workers. We're all making whatever an hour. We all now can, but that the ideology of white supremacy, or the way in which identity has been used to divide and conquer, they can't even see their collective interests with other workers who have the same job titles, work in the same plant that they do, and are going to vote against their own interests because they feel that it will be something that won't work for them.
Yeah, and maybe that's the opportunity before Joe Biden right now to capitalize on. I don't even know if that's the right word, but to figure out if he can be the messenger that helps people understand that there is an alternative way forward, and his ability to talk to working class people and communicate his story and bring people together. But I think also just add light to contrast the heat, to bring empathy and kindness and consideration and a lot of the things that we were taught in our homes and our churches and our schools, bringing back that sense of leadership and light. And I hope, frankly, Darren, giving people real alternatives, like put down, the gun and pick up a shovel, like give them jobs in the red state areas that are most inclined to go toward the Proud Boys. If you can give them an economic alternative and make them part of the future, you can shave them off and get them to join that future and be less resistant in fighting it. We've seen that in Iraq after the debathification, so many of the places around the world. But that sense of light, I think, is important. You bring that sense of light and positivity. So the question I want to ask you, Darren, I ask of all of our guests, what makes you happy?
I look out every day into this country and I feel hopeful. I feel happy. I feel encouraged in spite of this moment we live in, because I know that my story would not have been possible in any other country but this country. And I know that there are people in this country who, like I did, boys and girls who have dreams. And there are people out there who see our work as helping to make this a country where dreams can continue to be realized, where the idea of dreaming is encouraged, and that hope remains at the center of the American narrative, because hope is the oxygen of democracy. And our job is to fill this world with as much air and oxygen as we can. And that's what we do, I hope, at the Ford Foundation. And that is what I know you do, Paul. And I know that our work together will not be in vain. I know that it will, in a small way, not changing the world, but in our own way, hopefully we are contributing to a better America, a more just, a more fair America.
Hope is the oxygen of democracy. I saw that on your Twitter bio. I want to put it on t-shirts everywhere. I think, we might have to reevaluate this, Darren. Maybe the Senate from Texas is not right for you and you need to run for president. Or, you'd make a heck of a running mate. I mean,
Paul, I can assure you, I don't think I could get elected dog catcher.
Well, maybe you can get appointed, because I think that the more the country hears from you and the more the world hears from you, I think it's very important that the world hear your voice, because yours is a voice of light and positivity and hope and patriotism. It's up to all of us now to reclaim patriotism in this moment after it's been hijacked. And I think that's a really important message that people are hearing of your story, your personal story, but also your commitment to service and your commitment to others and your leadership. And I'm really, really grateful for it. I wish we could be in person. We can't. So now I'm going to virtually present you some gifts. And
excellent.
Your home office looks as cool as your work office, I got to tell you. So maybe one day I can come join you and have another conversation.
You can come and have a Diet Pepsi here with me.
That's it. We've got new independent American gear coming your way as soon as it gets done.
Excellent.
Made by veterans.
Excellent.
We have Uncle Nearest Whiskey, which has an incredible story. If you don't know it, you're going to have to read up on it, but they are a great supporter of this show, introduced to us by our friend
I look forward to drinking some of Uncle Nearest.
Uncle Nearest, taught Jack Daniels how to do his job. And there's much more to it than that. But I hope you can enjoy that with your Diet Pepsi or anything else. We've also got, in season 1, we asked folks to choose colors of Peeps. I'm not going to ask you to choose blue, yellow, or pink, but I'm going to send them to you. It's a nostalgic part of this show. And one final question that divides all Americans. We do bring people together. We're a source of unity and positivity, but there's still one question that divides all Americans that I need you to sound off on. Darren Walker, if you had to choose, pancakes or waffles?
Waffles.
Why, Darren? Why?
Because when you eat waffles and you're from the South, you also have fried chicken.
A masterstroke of ingenuity. That is the best
like
answer.
Waffles and chicken, Paul. You know that.
That I do. That's one of the best parts about being in the South. That is a great American invention. And that is the best waffle. I'm a pancakes guy, but that's the best waffles argument I think you can possibly make. But we are so grateful for all the light you bring, all the positivity you bring. You are a guardian of our democracy right now and our values, and you are holding the line through some very, very hard years. And I just want to thank you for that service. Leadership is often about sacrifice, and you and all your colleagues at the Ford Foundation have sacrificed and continue to lead by example. And I'm just so grateful for that and your example. You're someone that our kids can look up to and that every American can root for. So thank you for all your leadership and your service, my friend.
Thank you, my friend. This has been great privilege, a great honor.
And think about that run for Senate. They need a senator down there right now. We have to do a hashtag, right? Darren for Texas.
No.
All right. Thank you so much, my friend. Stay vigilant.